Hello, hope you're well. It's bank holiday in the UK, bank holiday Monday, so I'm here in my allotment. I'm going to water my plants in a minute, my tomato plants in the greenhouse. It's a little bit windy, a little bit cloudy, but it's very quiet everywhere because I live about 5 miles from the beach, so everyone will be down at the beach on bank holiday, and I'm quite enjoying just having this little bit of a lull. But there's something I want to tell you about, something quite exciting, because tomorrow on Tuesday, don't even know what date we're on now, not sure what the date actually is, we must be getting toward the end of May. Anyway, tomorrow there'll be an upload of a video that I'm going to link as soon as it's available, and it's a lady called Pooja Chilukuri, who has a podcast called The Afterlife Podcast, and she has another podcast called Faith After Deconstruction. And she reached out to me and asked if we could have a chat on an interview, a Zoom meeting that she recorded, and that will be uploaded on her channel. So I'm really looking forward to that, because it was a really enjoyable interview from my point of view. And afterwards, when she stopped filming, we were like, oh, there's so much more we could talk about. But what she told me was, I first came to her attention when she watched a video about Mary outside the tomb. And it was the one, I'll link it at the end for those of you who may not have seen it. And it's, if I remember rightly, I'm saying that the tomb represented religion, the empty tomb, the relics of who he was, that he used to be there once, but it was just the burial clothing. And if you remember that the men disciples, Peter and someone else, it doesn't name whoever else it was, but it was a man, they rushed into the tomb and then they went back home quickly. But Mary was left, and she was weeping at the tomb, and I think I said that it was as though she was the first person who had to deconstruct her faith. Everything that she thought she knew was starting to dismantle, and she was grieving for that, grieving for what was lost. And it was in the grieving for what she'd lost that her head was down, so she didn't know that he was still there beyond the old story. She didn't know that it wasn't the end. And he started talking to her, but she thought it was the gardener, and she didn't meet his eyes. So she was missing him, and she was just lost in her grief. And then he said, Mary. And it was when he said her name that she looked up and recognized him and said, Rabbi, teacher. And she sort of rushed towards him, and he said, don't touch me. So the point is, it was her name. And I was reminded, when I thought back about this, I was thinking about this personal aspect of this relationship with Jesus, and how it doesn't rely on religion. It may be that we first come to know about it through religion, but it is in a way independent of religion. And how it's what we mean by mysticism. Mysticism is a personal, it's a direct knowing without the need of a mediator, without the need of church, without the need of a belief system, without the need of a priest. It's just a direct relationship of love, and it's intimate. And I was thinking about how in my last video I talked about these sheaths, the koshas, and how we have the dualistic realm, which we function in all the time as human beings. But then there's this, at a deeper level or an inner level, there are these two other layers that are the wisdom body and the bliss, the body of bliss. And this is the true essence of who we really are, where it's impersonal, the separation collapses and it becomes impersonal. Now, I've heard non-dualist teachers use this term, it's impersonal. And I know what they mean, because they mean that the person, the personality, is this separate self, which is, now I have to be careful when I use this word, which is illusory, but not in that it isn't real and true. It's part of the dualistic realm All right, it's an arising in consciousness, so we play out these roles that we're separate selves. But when we sink back into the truth of who we really are, the separation collapses. And as I've said often, I've come to know this truth through reconnective healing, through practicing it. It wasn't a cerebral exercise for me, wanting to know the answers to it. It wasn't. It was actually having a phenomena in my life that I couldn't make sense of, and I was searching for an understanding of it. And it's only non-dual philosophy that makes sense of it, Advaita Vedanta. And through Advaita, which means not two, not non-dual, that's where the word non-duality comes from, then I've returned to Jesus, which I also know to be the truest part of my spirituality, the one thing that I can't deconstruct when everything else can fall away, the one thing that I know is real. I then tried to make sense of Jesus and his teaching, his wisdom teaching, in the light of that. So even though I can accept that it's impersonal, in that the personality and the personhood can disappear, and that we don't have to be attached to it, there is something more beyond that. I also know that I really struggled with this at first. When I first heard Rupert Spira talking about it, I thought, well, I don't know if I could really let go of the idea of a saviour, because I wanted there to be this, I didn't want to let go of this relationship with Jesus, this loving relationship which I knew to be real from my childhood. I talk about this in this podcast with Puja, and I also struggled with Buddhism for the same reason, because I knew the philosophy of Buddhism was non-theist, if you like. It's simply nirvana. Everything will just return to essence. I'm getting real tingles as I'm talking. I start talking on these videos and I feel these tingles. It'll be really interesting to see, Janet, if you're watching, if you notice some orbs, because Janet always points out orbs, and I think that there's something vibrational that actually happens when I start talking about all this stuff, because I feel it in my body. And Pooja told me when we'd finished the interview, she said to me, Jill, I was feeling it so strongly I couldn't even think about the next question because I was getting this vibrational activation. And she told me that she feels Jesus in her body. Now, Pooja's story is really interesting because she was a Hindu, brought up as a Hindu, and that was her home faith, if you like. And then she was converted to Christianity, but really like full-on fundamentalist Christianity. And she was, really into it, a real evangelist. And then she experienced things that, well, I don't know her full story. I'll let her tell her full story because I will do a return interview with her, hopefully. But fascinating story that she then went through a process of deconstruction and has come to this same place where I am, which is a more non-dual understanding, but this personal relationship with Jesus that's all she wants. It's just Jesus. It doesn't have to be all the belief system. And she was struck by this story of Mary, which was about this mysticism, this personal connection of love. And Buddhism seemed to be saying everything just goes back to, the ether, the all, but the personality is lost. I had a friend who is a Buddhist, and her partner was a Buddhist and died. And after, as you do, say to people who are suffering grief and loss, you say, it's not the end. You will see your loved one again. And in discussing that and suggesting that, I know that she sort of rejected that because it's not part of her belief. Her non-belief is that the soul isn't real. It just is all about going back to the oneness of the all. So they are in the breeze, and they're in the trees, and they're in the bird song, and the everything just returns and is recycled. And in one sense that's lovely, because you still have the material world and nature where you find comfort and solace. But the thought that you'll never actually see and have a conversation and be with that person again. That's something that for me left me feeling cold and empty. So I struggled with this idea of energy and consciousness as a sort of an impersonal thing, because it didn't feel love. Where's the love? You know, would I always be yearning for a person? Because I'm a human being. This is what I love about Christianity, that Jesus, it's God as a person, because we are people, and so we can only know love through personal interaction. And I think that what this model of the koshas gives us is that we're operating and functioning at all these different levels, and it's all of it. So that there is the mind body, and there is the subtle body, and there can be an arising in consciousness whereby that person is still accessible to us, and we can interact with them telepathically even after they're not here in the physical, because it's only one of the koshas, you know, it's just one of the layers of the onion, but they're still there. They're still there. And I've lost my thread now, why I was actually saying that. Oh yes, because I struggled with this teaching that it's impersonal. But what's so lovely is that Rupert Spira says it's impersonal, but it's not. It's impersonal in the sense of not limited to a personality, but it's incredibly intimate. It's intimate. So of course intimacy is what I'm really talking about. The intimacy whereby you don't feel the lack of anything. And if we've known intimacy in our lives, whether that's through a parent or a lover, but that sense of completeness and safety and almost losing yourself with the person, so that the sense of separation collapses because you're just in this love bubble, this cozy, safe place. Happy, safe place. Spira describes it as, let me just try to remember, I heard him, I was only listening to him this morning, and he said it's an innate peace, this awareness that is the ground of our being has a quality to it, and its nature is innate peace and quiet joy. Innate peace and quiet joy. It's not an emptiness. It's not impersonal in the general sense of what we mean. It's intimate and loving. And so to come back to Mary hearing and recognizing him because he said her name, I'm reminded of my sheep know my voice. Jesus was talking about a shepherd, the good shepherd, and how the sheep recognize the voice of the shepherd. And if it's an imposter and it's not really the shepherd, they'll scatter because they know it's not authentic. It's not the person. And this is how it is. The voice is resonance, isn't it? The voice is resonance. It's a vibration. It has a vibrational resonance. So when something doesn't match the vibrational signature of Jesus, of the Master, we know it ain't true. We say, I'm not buying that. Okay, so things may be branded as Christian. People might be using the name of Jesus, but if it doesn't have the resonance, we know because of the vibration. We know because of the voice. We recognize it. And then I was also reminded of a story in the Old Testament. Now, I don't speak about the Old Testament much, largely, but sometimes things in our minds make connections and links, and it's good that happens, because there's this thing called typology. It's a term in theology where there are types, just like you get the word archetypes, where there are patterns and stories that repeat, and they're usually foreshadowing something that's to come. And this is how revelation unfolds. The prophets foretold of this, and then you'll be able to trace it and say, yeah, it's like mapping out something. Okay, and So this Mary hearing his voice, I was reminded of the story in the Old Testament of Samuel and Eli, and you can look that up in 1 Samuel chapter 3, and it's the story of the young Samuel who was at the temple, serving at the temple for the priest Eli, and at night he was sleeping and heard a voice, and he would say, as he would say, yes, master, I'm listening, what do you want? And he ran to Eli, woke him up, and Eli's like, I didn't call you, go back to sleep. And then it happened a second time where he heard his name, Samuel, Samuel. So he ran to Eli. And the second time Eli said, I didn't call you. And then the third time Eli realized what was happening, and he said, it's the Lord calling you. So if it happens again, then say, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. And so that is what happened. And then as the story unfolds, I just read on earlier, and it's that God was talking to Samuel because he wasn't happy with Eli, because Eli had failed in his duty to hold the nation accountable for their sins, for their iniquities, and to challenge them on it. So he was going directly to Samuel to say, you need to be the voice, you need to speak up. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that it was the name and the direct relationship, the direct listening, not going via Eli. So he was doing at the beginning what was his usual custom to do, was to go to the priest. What is it? Tell me. And in this story, the priest, Eli, represents religion and the tradition, institutional tradition. And so here we have Samuel recognizing the voice and having that inner dialogue that bypasses the need for a mediator. And I think that this is a precursor to, and it's foreshadowing what happened with Mary, who was left out of the apostolic, structure and formulation as the church started to gather and become organised. Mary was left out, and she was even written out of the narratives, wasn't she? Or if she was a follower of Jesus, she was never named as a disciple. She just happened to be there in the background a little bit, but she was sort of maybe she didn't fit the mould, maybe she wasn't at home with the children doing the homemaker thing for whatever reason. So they didn't really know what to do with her, but they didn't make her an apostle. And so she's perhaps the first model, the first person. Certainly she was the first one to get the news, he's risen, he's not there. She was the first one to proclaim what became the central charisma, the message of Christianity, the good news. But maybe she's our model for that direct relationship with Jesus through a connection of love, the first mystic that doesn't have to rely on the church and the organisation and the institution. So I just thought I would share those thoughts with you today. And as soon as I watch the video that Pooja will be uploading, as soon as I've seen it, I will see that it's uploaded, I will put the link in this video. So I'm going to upload this hopefully today, and then I will put a comment, and I'll pin the comment so it'll be at the top in the comments section, so you'll be able to go straight and watch it. Okay, so yeah, thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you're doing, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. God bless.